Plastic is an area that is very contentious, and we need to strike the balance between what's right for the environment and what is the perception of plastic that people hold. So first and foremost, packaging needs to meet very high regulatory standards around food safety and safety of things like cosmetics and cleaning products. But it also needs to meet very high quality standards, because if the packaging isn't doing that, we end up wasting product, and that creates a bigger environmental impact. We also then need to make sure that the packaging that we use has the lowest environmental footprint. And in many instances, plastic is actually the best option for that right here, right now. That doesn't mean it always will be in the future. And there's a lot of research going on looking at alternate types of material that could be used. But you can't take your frozen peas home in your pocket. And we do need to recognise that where we are, plastic does play an important role. We are seeing industry move out of plastic where they can. But there are a number of instances where businesses have looked at the life cycle impact of alternates and they weren't any better, and in some situations led to a worse off environmental outcome. So plastic has a role right now. In the future, alternates will become available, and we need to keep working with governments, with other stakeholders to do more research to see how we can find those alternates that are actually going to meet the high safety and quality standards that the industry needs. That requires research, it requires investment, and they're areas we need to really collaborate with governments. Soft plastic is a really important material. It protects the quality of the food and the safety of the food, as well as being a lower environmental footprint than other materials. And we're seeing it more widely used, not only in food, but also refill pouches for cleaning products, for example. But that material doesn't have great circularity, and most of it is going into landfill. So as Food and Grocery Council, we've been working with leading brands to develop a system which will enable that material to be able to turn back into recycled plastic packaging. We don't want to see it going into landfill. We also don't want it long-term to be going into just park benches and road base. We want to be able to get that material back into packaging and make that recycled content. That requires the creation of a whole new circular economy for soft plastics, and we're developing a product stewardship scheme where brands will lead and play a really important role in funding economic gaps in a whole new supply chain, and that will stimulate investment in new technologies such as chemical recycling that will be able to turn those soft plastics back into oil and back into packaging again. We've had a significant mindset shift in the industry around packaging and how we can use it as a resource. So we've seen that initially with container deposit schemes, which stimulated then the beverage industry to really drive the uptake of recycled content and even investment in some plants to be able to manufacture that material. What we've been looking at as AFGC is soft plastics. That's the material used widely across the industry, anywhere from cleaning product refill pouches through to a bag of toilet paper or bread or confectionery, for example. This material makes up 40% of all plastic packaging, but it didn't have an end-of-life solution that was really effective. When we had return to store schemes initially, they were only collecting about 4% of soft plastics. So we've been developing a scheme that would enable that material to be diverted from landfill. What that looks like is for a consumer to be able to put their soft plastics in a special purpose bag that would go into a curbside recycling bin, and for that then to be separated out and to be transformed back into oil, which can be made back up into plastics and remade back into packaging. There's a really important role for industry playing the leadership in designing these sorts of schemes. But we do need every user of soft plastic to be a part of this for it to work. And that's why it is important that if businesses don't come on board, there is a role for government to encourage others to be part of it, because collectively we need to be able to support this scheme for it to actually be effective. And Minister for Environment has made very strong commitment that she will regulate if industry doesn't move. So we're trying to show leadership, but we need, outside of the food and grocery industry, all other businesses that use soft plastic to get on board and to work with us. To get the circular economy, we've done a lot of work looking at the role that various parties have to play around that circularity roadmap. So, first of all, for brands, our role is really on the design of the packaging, making sure it is the lowest environmental footprint for the type of material that we're using and the way that we're designing that. Packaging, so colours and lids and closures and all those sorts of things. Secondly, the role that brands can play is around recycled labelling, and we're seeing increased adoption of the Australasian recycling label. And a third area for brands is using recycled content in their packaging. But brands alone can't solve this challenge around packaging. There's a role for government in supporting infrastructure. So where there are gaps in recycling infrastructure or collection infrastructure, there is a role for government in funding some of those. And then there's also a role for government in setting standards for the waste and recycling industry. And so for food manufacturers, we need to know that the recycled content we're buying is safe, which means that we need to know that there is traceability through that waste and recycling system. And another area for governments is working with consumers on educating them around what goes in which bin and making sure we have harmonisation of different bins across the country. So we all have a role to play as different stakeholders, and it's only by all of us playing those roles and working collectively that we will improve the outcomes of reducing the amount of packaging that goes into landfill and reducing the environmental footprint from packaging.